All right, moving right along, we've got the fourth sign, Cancer. Let's go through the compatibility. But first of all, in general, Cancer is going to be looking for energies which are honest, humble, and also trustworthy because, above all else, it's important for the sign to feel comfortable and feel secure. So, first of all, Cancer with Aries. Overall, this isn't going to work very well. Cancer's water, Aries is fire. Together, fire and water make steam. So steam can be steamy. It can be, kind of sexual. It could be interesting and sort of passionate. There could be sort of an opposites attract here. Aries is very kind of dominant sign and very outgoing, and then Cancer's a little bit more reflective or more withdrawn. So there can be kind of an opposites attract. Aries can like the chase, and might want to pursue Cancer. Both are very emotional, but they're very emotional in very different ways. Aries is more blunt and straightforward. Cancer's more kind of Cancer is more drawn to sort of understated personalities. So like I said, Cancer likes humility. It doesn't mind sort of understated or, it doesn't mind subtlety. And it doesn't really get that with Aries. Aries is more kind of black and white, very blunt, very kind of irreverent. And so I could see Aries sort of, whether intentionally or unintentionally, just kind of getting on Cancer's bad side, maybe sort of offending or annoying Cancer just because it's maybe a little bit too overbearing for Cancer's taste. And also Aries is kind of turbulent. It's constantly active and constantly doing different things, going in different directions. And so that wouldn't really make Cancer feel very secure. Another thing is Cancer is more of a homebody and Aries is more active and is going to be out in the world doing things. And so there's just really not a lot of compatibility here overall. Just to go through the angle real quick, Aries is 3 signs away from Cancer, so that makes a square. And so while they're both having the same mode, they're both cardinal. They are different elements. One's water, one's fire, like I said. So they clash. They don't have a lot in common. This doesn't really work. Next is Taurus, and this is going to work much, much, much better. Taurus is 2 signs away. That makes a sextile, and so it's a very complementary relationship. Taurus is earth, Cancer is water, and so Taurus provides Cancer with a lot of structure and stability. Both kind of like stability. They're very consistent signs, and they will make each other feel secure because of that consistency. They're both very reliable, and they might feel like they can trust each other, and so that can help them to open up. But yeah, Taurus is going to be very grounded, and that will be very nice for Cancer. Cancer can be very emotional. It can it can be ungrounded at times, and so Cancer will appreciate the structure and stability that Taurus provides. And in return, Taurus will very much appreciate Cancer because Cancer is going to be very nurturing. If you think about it, like Cancer is water, and so it sort of nurtures the earth. Cancer is going to make I think Cancer could kind of lighten up Taurus a little bit, get it out of its shell, or get Taurus to loosen up a little bit and have a little bit more fun. And so, Taurus will appreciate that, and then Cancer will appreciate the groundedness. So overall, this works really well. They have a lot in common, and even their differences just help each other, I think, and they will appreciate each other's differences. Another thing is that there's a lunar connection since the moon is in domicile in Cancer and exalted in Taurus. So both will have sort of lunar qualities. So they're going to be more receptive, more introverted, maybe more sensitive or considerate of the emotions of others, I guess, just in general, more empathetic, I guess. And yeah, so overall this works really, really well, and kind of it almost doesn't matter really the context. Taurus and Cancer are known to be some of the most compatible signs. Next, you've got Gemini, which is only 1 sign away, so that's a semi-sextile. And whenever you have a semi-sextile, it's very hit and miss. It's on and off. These signs can definitely be attracted to each other, and that's something I've noticed a lot, that they are drawn to each other. So I'll just explore that first real quick. I think why they're drawn together, this is going to be a little bit obscure, but just bear with me. So if you look at the houses in a natal chart, the houses that Gemini and Cancer correlate to are the 3rd and 4th houses, which are both at the base of the chart. They're always at the bottom, and right around the IC or the 4th house cusp. And so in a way, these 2 signs definitely aren't very simple personalities. There's just definitely some complexity there, but I think the themes in which they represent are simple, just because Gemini is basically thoughts and Cancer is emotions, and so they're almost like 2 sides of the same coin. They're both very focused on the present, and so both can be somewhat spontaneous, or they don't get too worked up about, being anxious about the future, or, regarding the past. They're both very much in the moment, and so they have that in common. Also, both can have sort of a sense of humor, although their senses of humor are a little bit different, but I think both can be sort of humorous signs, and they would appreciate that in one another. And then just going back to what I said at the beginning, if Cancer is looking for someone humble and honest, it could definitely find those things in Gemini. Gemini can be sort of quirky and maybe a little bit understated at times, depending on what type of Gemini energy we're working with. So there can be sort of an attraction here. I think that they definitely would at least appreciate one another at first, but I think once they get closer, there's not a lot in common to bind these two together. Gemini is just so scattered, and Cancer is more slow and prudent, maybe, or Cancer is more sensitive and careful, and Gemini is kind of just sporadic and all over the place. And so Gemini might get a little bit bored of Cancer, and Cancer might wouldn't feel safe with Gemini just because of the lack of consistency, I guess. So at the end of the day, there's just not a whole lot in common. There is that attraction, but it's very hit and miss. It would be difficult to have consistent agreeableness between these two, and it would require a lot of compromise or understanding just because of their differences. Next, you've got Cancer and Cancer. So, combining a sign with itself, sometimes it works better with some signs than others. In this case, it would work pretty well. Of course, there's going to be a lot of just easiness to the dynamic, because, obviously it's just easier to work with energies similar to your own. So you'll already have that understanding and, the same interests and all that. That's pretty intuitive there. So yeah, it will be a very easy dynamic, I guess. The downside is that there's not really a whole lot of passion, or, there's not a lot to keep it interesting. The downside of working with a similar energy to yourself is that neither of you will really learn a lot unless it's just learning more about yourself. So especially early in life, we tend to go towards energies which are similar to our own, just because we're still learning about ourselves to some extent. So especially like a friendship early on, I think Cancer friendship would be really beneficial. But as we mature, we usually tend to seek something a little bit different from ourselves to kind of branch out. And so this would be a really nice dynamic to fall back on. I think particularly for Cancer, since Cancer likes the familiar, it likes just sticking with what's already familiar to it. Especially if there's two Cancers within a family, they're probably gonna have a very, very close bond. And or like a childhood friend, I'm thinking they might have a very, very close bond and keep that into adulthood, just depending on the dynamic. So yeah, they definitely could cling on to each other, and I think they Cancer could feel very, very safe, dealing with a more predictable and consistent energy, something similar to its own. So overall, this would be a very good match. Like I said, especially I'm thinking within a family or a childhood friendship would work super, super well for this, just because, Cancer's so nurturing, and so two Cancers would be very nurturing to one another and make each other feel safe. Next, we are moving away from Cancer now with Leo. So Leo is one sign away. You've got a semi-sextile, so very hit and miss. Again, both are sort of two sides of the same coin in a way, just because Cancer is ruled by the moon and Leo is ruled by the sun. Both are very much summer signs, and so they have a lot of similar themes that they work with. To both Cancer and Leo, family is very important. So these are both very fiercely loyal signs, but they are very different. So Cancer is going to be more introverted. It's water, so it's more reflective and emotional, more sensitive. Leo is fire, so it's more just active and outgoing. It's more dominant, maybe a little bit overbearing, compared to Cancer's more indirectness. Cancer would be more indirect, Leo would be more direct. So I think they could kind of get on each other's toes a little bit. Like Leo could be maybe too abrasive or too direct for Cancer, and Cancer might be kind of too slow or too sensitive for Leo. But I think that especially if they have some kind of mutual understanding, so either if they have some kind of familiar background, or if they are developed enough to be open-minded, in order to respect one another, I don't think they would always agree, but I think they would be fiercely defensive of one another if they had something bonding them or some kind of mutual understanding. Just because of what I said, they're both very tribal. They're both very much about. They have a lot of pride with their family and are very loyal. Some of the most loyal signs. So yeah. So overall, no, this wouldn't really work. There's just so much different. But I think they could be defensive of one another and have sort of a loyalty. But other than that, it's just kind of a weird combination. It would depend on some other placements that, again, there's just not really a lot in common here. Next, you've got Virgo, 2 signs away, so that's a sextile. This actually works pretty well. I think it's kind of an underrated combination in astrology. Again, kind of like with Taurus, it's a sextile. So Cancer's water, Virgo's earth. Cancer will make Virgo feel nurtured and maybe also kind of loosen up Virgo a little bit, bring some fun to the combination, and then Virgo will provide Cancer with some structure. Let's see what else. Yeah, I think people can sometimes miss how sensitive Virgo is as a sign. Virgo is actually like very emotional. They just usually kind of keep it controlled or keep it under wraps. They use logic to to keep themselves feeling emotionally safe. And so I think Virgo could warm up very much to Cancer, with Cancer being so openly nurturing or openly emotional. I think Virgo could kind of just soak that up and feel really safe, and that would allow Virgo to kind of loosen up, like I said. And then likewise, the discipline and structure that Virgo has, where Virgo is kind of keeping everything under control, that could make Cancer feel really safe, and could be really beneficial to both of them. I think the main thing that could be a source of contention here is that Virgo can be very detail oriented and very focused on physical things, so like small physical details, which could kind of drive Cancer crazy a little bit, because I think both can be kind of detail oriented, but Cancer is ultimately not really concerned with like physical things. Cancer's water, so it's more emotional, and I think maybe the detail orientedness could drive Cancer a little bit crazy. And then likewise, Cancer's lack of maybe being as organized, Cancer's not a very organized sign, I don't think, and so that could kind of get on Virgo's nerves. That's the main thing I think could be difficult for them, especially if they're living together. I think their living styles would be very different, and that would be difficult for them. But other than that, it is a sextile. It is very harmonious. It is complementary. So overall, I think it is generally a really good match. Next, we are 3 signs away with Libra, so that makes it a 90-degree square aspect, and so there's some contention here. Both have the same mode, but a different element. These in particular are very much drawn to each other, and I'm not sure exactly why. I do know both are ruled by sort of feminine planets, with Cancer being ruled by the moon and Libra being ruled by Venus. And so even though Libra's a yang sign, its planetary ruler is very feminine, and so it's sort of the most receptive of the yang signs, I think. And then Cancer, with Cancer being cardinal, well, with both being cardinal, I guess, they're both open to forming new relationships. They're both very good at forming new friendships or just relationships in general. So I think maybe that's part of why they can be so receptive to each other, and they can start a new connection very easily with one another. But again, once they get a little bit closer to one another, their differences could be very difficult to handle. There'd have to be some kind of compromise, because there's just some friction there. There's always going to be friction when you're combining signs that square one another. Libra is more just kind of all over the place. It doesn't really take anything seriously. I think the main difference is Libra is so detached, and that might not be apparent at first to Cancer, because Libra can kind of seem very bubbly. Libra can sometimes actually seem like a water sign. It can seem more sensitive or bubbly and more emotional, but really it's actually very, very detached. And so I think that can lead to some misunderstandings with Cancer being so emotional and so sensitive. They might think that they have more in common to one another. Oh, and also likewise, Cancer can seem not as emotional at first because it has that shell, that protective layer. So Cancer will either seem very reserved and kind of stoic, or it'll be more outgoing, but either way it won't present itself as being as emotional as it is. And then Libra will present itself as being maybe a little bit more sensitive or emotional than it actually is. And so I think that's the point of misunderstanding, which will draw them to each other, but then they'll quickly realize there would be challenges that would manifest from that difference. Libra just not really taking anything too seriously, not being too attached to anything, and Cancer being very attached and, taking things seriously or just close to heart, I guess. Yeah, so that would lead to a lot of problematic situations, I think. And so these signs in particular, I've noticed they are drawn to each other, but they'll end up kind of bickering or fighting. It's just, it would take a certain combination or, some kind of uniting force to allow them to put aside their differences and, to have that compatibility in a long-term situation. So overall, no, this wouldn't really work very well. Okay, now we are 4 signs away. So this is the first trine aspect. We're on the first fellow water sign other than Cancer with Scorpio. So, of course, both are water. They have very much in common, much more in common than they do different. Also, in particular, if you think about what animal rules these, Cancer is the crab, Scorpio is obviously the scorpion. And so both have that protective layer, that shell with the soft inside. So both might kind of seem a little bit abrasive, or they usually kind of play tough, I think, or that's my perception of it anyway. Or they project this protective layer outward, and that's what that shell is. And so I think there can just be a very quick mutual understanding between these two because of that similar approach. Both can kind of play tough, but then, pretty quickly understand one another and maybe go, beyond that protective shell and allow each other to be sort of soft and open. Also, both are very consistent. Cancer is cardinal, but it's a very consistent sign. It likes consistency. It likes what's familiar to it already. It likes kind of doing the same thing, more conservative or careful. And then Scorpio is fixed, so of course Scorpio is going to have a lot of those similar qualities of being more consistent, and so, and also with both being so sensitive, both will desire consistency in others because both can feel out of control. Both are so emotional and can be very emotionally intense, and so both will very much appreciate not only the stability that the other provides, but also that they're both more sensitive, more emotional, and so there's just going to be that mutual understanding between the two. So overall, this works super, super well, especially as friends. They just have so much in common. They could just very easily form an alliance and, to form trust with one another very quickly. One thing I would mention is, like, if anything happens whatsoever where that trust is broken, it would take a very, very long time for them to build it back, if at all, unless there's some kind of like passionate relationship going on. That would get more complicated. But even then, even if in the context of a passionate relationship, if there's some major hurt or betrayal, I don't think either one would ever fully forget it. I mean, both just hold on to things for so long. They remember things so vividly for so long, and they're both so emotionally intense. So that's the only thing, as long as that trust is maintained consistently, which it definitely could be, then this would be a really, really great combination. Okay, hold on. Let me get some water here. Next, we're on Sagittarius, which is 5 signs away, so that's a quincunx. Quincunx is just like it sounds. It's kind of problematic and awkward. So these have so little in common. Whenever you have signs that are 5 signs away from one another, you can't have much less in common. The main difference here is that Cancer's ruled by the moon, so Cancer's more sensitive. It's the sign of home, and family and what's familiar. Sagittarius is all about what is not familiar. It's all about traveling and, trying exotic things or, meeting different kinds of people. So at their core, what they're about is just so different. It just so wouldn't work. There's nothing in common here. I mean, if I rack my brain for any commonalities, both are sort of emotional, I think. Also, both could have both are kind of thinkers and feelers. I think they would both be feelers first, but they also do have some, definitely some rational ability. Sagittarius can be kind of intellectual, and then Cancer can have a sort of refreshing common sense about it in a way, like a no-nonsense approach. And so I think just looking at that side of it, I guess they do have that in common. But again, I mean, Sagittarius is just all over the place. It's more of a party energy. Cancer can kind of enjoy a good party. But at the end of the day, Cancer is going to want to have a place to come back to, which is very secure and more, I don't want to say controlled, but more like predictable or familiar, you know, a place to kind of just be safe and vulnerable. Sagittarius isn't going to really have any need for that. Sagittarius is going to want excitement all the time and drama. And, you know, that drama is not something that Cancer is looking for. You know, Cancer might seem kind of too boring or too sensitive for Sagittarius. Sagittarius might seem offensive or out of control or reckless for Cancer, maybe too abrasive. So overall, these just don't really work well together. And next is Capricorn. So all the way across, forming that opposition with Cancer. Whenever you're combining two opposing signs, it's of course very interesting because you know they are opposite, so they'll have a lot different, but they will usually have a surprising amount in common as well. It's almost like they are doing the exact opposite approaches but getting to the same place with it in a way. But with these in particular, I think of the opposing pairs of signs, Cancer and Capricorn have the least in common. Both are cardinal, but Cancer's water and Capricorn is earth. So they're both very stubborn and more conservative. Both are, that's the main thing. Both are going to want a lot of consistency, and they don't mind that predictability. They want something safe, reliable, familiar. So there can be an opposites attract here. They can, you know, those would benefit them in a connection between one another. They will appreciate that reliability and that loyalty. Both they're very, very loyal signs that will, you know, protect and defend one another. So that can work very well. Another way it could work well is that Capricorn more represents, you know, the outside world, or, you know, society, or like working or being productive in the outer world. And then Cancer's more at home, ruling the home. And so that can actually work kind of well with like the Cancer kind of taking control of domestic affairs, and then Capricorn being the more representative to the outside world. So they can sort of use their differences strategically. It's almost like Capricorn, I'm totally stealing this from someone, I don't remember who, but it's like Capricorn builds the home, it provides a structure, and then Cancer, you know, fills the home, or, you know, makes the structure into a more comfortable home, I guess. So both can work really well on that level. I think it would take both of them to be very mature and very open, though. I think both would usually have to be very developed before this connection can happen, just because they both are stubborn and both are going to be wanting consistency and wanting, I mean, since they're so conservative, they're not usually very open to branching out to like other types of energies, if that makes sense. And so that's where the ironic thing is that they are so similar, but those similarities would make it more difficult for them to understand each other's differences. The main difference is just Capricorn being so structured and Cancer being so unstructured. That might be difficult as well if they are looking for an energy similar to themselves. Capricorn might seem too serious or disciplined for Cancer, and that could make Cancer feel stifled. And then Cancer could seem too out of control for Capricorn to some extent. And so that's just why I say that I think both of these would have to be more developed and mature for this connection to work, and more secure within themselves, and therefore open to connecting with other energies, you know, and maybe being able to compromise in some areas. So overall, there definitely are some difficulties, but overall I'd say this is a really good connection. Probably later in life, though. You know, also both of them think in the long term. So maybe later in life, just not always at an early age, maybe. But overall, this is a good combination. Next, we've got Aquarius. So again, now we're descending through the angles after the opposition. So 5 signs away is a quincunx. So these have almost nothing in common. Maybe even less than Sagittarius, just because Cancer's arguably, you know, potentially the most emotional sign, and Aquarius could be the least emotional sign. Aquarius is emotional, but it's in a sort of obscure way, which is not obvious. And so I think that could be kind of unsettling for both of them, where there's that lack of understanding. Cancer might just seem way too sensitive for Aquarius, and then Aquarius might seem too like Cancer might think that Aquarius doesn't care, or that they are just, they're just too detached basically. And also Cancer is so subjective and Aquarius is objective, meaning like Cancer is more focused on the personal. Cancer knows what it feels personally, what's true to their heart and themselves, or also their family. Aquarius is more passive in those contexts. It's more focused just on society and what's like right for everyone on a more abstract or obscure level or holistic level. So both might think that the other one just doesn't care, but it's not that they don't care. It's just that they're looking at totally different aspects of reality, I guess, or they have totally opposite approaches in a way. Yeah, and I mean the main thing is just Cancer's so emotional and Aquarius is so unemotional, so it'd be difficult. There would have to be some kind of configuration in these charts or some kind of unifying force. They just don't. There's just nothing in common. Also, Aquarius has a more structured discipline side to it with the Saturnian influence, but then it also has a kind of unpredictable, spontaneous or impulsive nature with the Uranus influence. And I think either side of that wouldn't really work with Cancer, because the structured side would be too structured for Cancer, since Cancer is conservative, but it's also, it follows its own emotions. And so it does want structure to some degree just to feel safe, but it also wants room to just do whatever it kind of feels like in the moment. And so Aquarius's more unpredictable side will make Cancer feel unsafe and out of control, but then Aquarius's disciplined, strict or serious side will seem too cold for Cancer. So like this, I'm probably going to pick this as my least favorite combination for Cancer. It just so doesn't work. Again, it would take some kind of specific situation. There'd have to be some kind of details here, but just the signs themselves, there's really nothing connecting these two together. Okay, lastly is Pisces. So Pisces, again, we've got a trine 4 signs away from Cancer, and so they're both water element signs. So they have a lot in common. Both are emotional, sensitive, kind of intuitive, empathetic. These are all water things. They're also more reflective or more kind of introverted signs. Both are introverted, but they can also be very open to the world. If you just mix a little bit of air or fire in a Cancer or Pisces charts, they'll be very open and very open to new experiences and very sociable. So they both have that in common, where they are more sensitive and can be a little bit closed off or internalized, but at the same time can be very open to the world, open to other, forming relationships with other people, or just empathetic in general. So they have a lot in common. I think the main difference in the sorts of contention is that Pisces is so scattered. Like Cancer is the crab, it has a shell, so it does want some consistency. It wants what's familiar to it. Pisces is the fish, so it's more just kind of, it's soft on the inside and the outside. It's kind of just flippy floppy, just kind of going everywhere. There's no structure at all. There's no predictability. And so I think Cancer, that could make Cancer feel a little bit unsafe. There's no predictability. There's no structure. Cancer does like a little bit of structure. However, they do have enough in common that Cancer might still feel safe anyway, just because there's so much in common that they would understand each other very well. So overall, there's a lot in common here. Overall, it would work very well. Whenever you're working with trining signs, they just have so much in common. It'd be there would just be an ease to it. They would understand and relate to each other so much. And I think also Cancer can have that shell, but I think Pisces' softness and vulnerability could kind of allow Cancer to open up more quickly. That's something too. And then, Cancer is soft on the inside, and so then they can be more vulnerable to each other, because both are definitely very tough and resilient signs, but at the same time, they are more soft or, vulnerable or sensitive, I guess. And so I think that could allow both Cancer and Pisces to feel safe and secure with one another. So overall, it is a really good combination, I would say. Okay, so that concludes this video. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll see you later.